Hello, friends. Excuse me. How are you doing today? I forgot the filter. Last thing you want is a bunch of leaves in your tea. Anyway, thanks for telling me. We're having a green tea today. I am feeling so much better. Thank you all so much for your kind words, for just the assurance, like take your time, rest, we'll be here. That means a lot because, like I said in the other video, there is kind of this pressure to keep producing. This one's for you. And to keep creating, even though, you're sick and that grind and hustle. And again, nothing against that. Like if you are a person who is out to hustle and grind and conquer the world, go for it. Seriously. I believe in you. If that is your dream, you should follow it. It is increasingly becoming less and less my dream, though, personally. Like, I really love the idea of the, tribal shaman who just sits in his tent or up on the mountains or out in the desert, and you would go out to find them for wisdom and information, help you solve your problems because their perspective is outside of the day-to-day. And that's where I want to end up. I want to get outside of this everyday hustle and everything. Like I'm not necessarily anti-capitalism, but I don't want to be a part of it personally. I don't even know that I want to be a part of society anymore. I don't know. I'm just not interested in doing all the work that goes into being a part of it. But I don't know what that means. I can't really become a hermit in the mountains quite like it used to. Anyway, that's another topic for another day. Well, whether you are realizing your life needs to change like me, or whether you are currently making the changes you need to make in your life, please remember at some point today to get up, to stretch a little bit, to drink some water, take your meds if that applies to you. Eat something if you can. And I hope that you remember that you are loved, you matter. I am so glad that you're here with me. And I hope that you have a good day, or, do what you need to do to survive the day. Cheers. Alright, so we're going to get back into the Q&A. I have 3 questions that were put to me that I want to address today because they mostly follow the theme of routines and schedules and things like that and the various ways that it affect us. Alright, so the first question, with your autism, do you have difficulty reading people's social cues, or do you have difficulty responding appropriately to what people are saying? And then the second question is, with ADHD, when you are off schedule, do you have problems knowing what to do next? If so, do you ever get tired of needing to be on a schedule so as not to space out and lose time if this applies to you? Alright, so I'm going to tackle the first question. Yes, I have difficulty reading people's social cues, facial expressions, voice inflection, all of that. It is a lot like learning a second language, I imagine. I've never been great with languages, I think because English and nonverbal is so hard for me as it is that adding is just difficult. I've tried before and it's really tough, but it's because I have to translate. So when I'm talking to you in person, especially if there's a crowd of people, but let's just say one-on-one, I am having to learn how to map your face and your facial expressions and start gauging the rhythms of how you speak and voice inflections and patterns. And that does interest me. And if it's a casual thing and there's no pressure to the social interaction, I actually enjoy it because it is challenging. And so it's a hobby of mine. I do like to learn you and who you are and what matters to you. It's what I loved about teaching. And eventually I do get the hang of it and it gets easier. So just because it's hard for me doesn't mean I can't do it. I can do it, it's just challenging. And for the most part, I enjoy the challenge. It becomes a problem when I'm in a group setting. So at a group dinner or a party or a networking event or in a meeting at work with a bunch of people or in a crowd, that's when it becomes overwhelming, because now I am trying to pay attention to a conversation shifting from one person to the next, and I might not have tracked that person's facial expression, so now I've got to try to remember what that means, and now this person's, and so it's jumping back and forth. It's as if each person is speaking their own language. So if I'm talking to 7 people, it feels like I'm having a conversation in 7 different languages. And that becomes very overwhelming and very stressful, because my mind is trying to process everything. It's like, you ever seen Inside Out and how there's all the little people in their heads? Well, for me, I have a person in my head who creates a binder for each person. And in that binder are all of their likes and dislikes, how to keep them happy, how to keep them sad, what offends them, and what all their facial expressions and everything means. And so every time you talk to me, that little guy is running around flipping the binder and being like, okay, yeah, that's what it means. And then I come up with a reply. And that's very exhausting. And it can be very stressful. But if I don't do it, then I'm worried about whether or not what I've said has offended the person or hurt their feelings or whatever. And I am learning that I don't need to worry about that quite as much as I thought. But but especially in the past, that was a source of a lot of stress. And it is, like I said, overwhelming. There's a lot of people. All right, I've answered the question. Anyway, okay, so the second question was, when I'm off schedule, do I have problems knowing what to do? Absolutely. Now, granted, I am 43 years old, so I've had a long time to live with me, if you will. So there are certain things that I will remember, and part of that is anxiety. Anxiety does help me remember things. It's not a healthy way to manage it, which is why I prefer my routines, because they calm me down. Because I stick with the routine, I know what to do. If I'm off my routine, I try to get back to it as quickly as possible, because it's too stressful to try to remember what I need to do. It's like we all have like kind of like a whiteboard in our heads where you can kind of write something and go back and like, oh yeah, there it is, and you can erase it and move on. I guess it's called short-term memory. My mental whiteboard is very small, and I can only keep so many things on there, and so it can become very stressful trying to retain too much, remember what I'm supposed to be doing. And so that's why I have alarms and routines and everything to keep me going. Without it, I can get lost, I can mess things up. There's always a sense that I've forgotten something. And do I ever get tired of needing to be on a schedule? Yes. Oh my gosh, child, yes. I get really tired of it because it starts to feel like my life is on rails and it stresses me out. Kind of like what I talked about in the previous video. Being autistic and having ADHD, they fight with each other sometimes. You know, the routines are calming for ADHD as far as making sure the critical things are done. You know, like when my bills get paid, I have a routine that pops up where the first part of the routine is mapping down, okay, what are the amounts that need to go in, so I can plan that, and then the act of actually paying them. It's the whole system that I have. That's very calming, but that's also once a month. It's the daily routines that really wear me out. And so that's why on Saturdays, that's what I call a nothing day. There are no alarms, or there's very few alarms, like life-giving alarms, like take my medications. Other than that, there's no routine that day at all whatsoever. It is a blank slate. I can do whatever I feel like with it, whatever I want to with it, and it is very helpful for me. It gives me a day to just bleh, and I can reset. Also in the evening, so from 4 o'clock until 7:30, or 5 o'clock, there's a 2-hour gap where there's nothing. There's no routine. There's nothing I need to do, and that's also a break. Work is done, you know, and until it's time for my bedtime routine, I also have a couple hours to just space out, and that is helpful. It's tricky because then my time blindness kicks in without my alarms and routines, and a whole day could go by and it could feel like it was 5 minutes. Like I've been off this whole week with COVID, and there were definitely a couple days that felt like they were 2 hours long because I didn't have any routines, and I was just, of course I was also napping a lot and whatever, and playing video games, so I really was doing nothing stimulating. Well, video games were a little bit, but you know what I mean. And outside of getting to the point where I was consistently getting some victories in Fortnite, I didn't accomplish anything this week. But it's what I needed. I needed that rest. Actually, I did a couple things. I'll talk about those later. Anyway, so yeah, that's the first question, routines. All right, the next question. The struggle with executive function and hygiene is something that just gets to me a lot. Okay, so this is more of a statement than a question, but I do want to address it. Standing in front of the sink to brush teeth or the shower to get clean, which is always exhausting because I'm having to consciously think about every step to not forget it, and then also health issues, being very sensory, everything. Hygiene and routines, very important. Before I really had established routines, I would sometimes, if I was really fixated on what I was doing, if I was focused on an activity or a project or whatever my obsession was, especially when I was single, I could go days without taking care of myself. I might go a day without eating. And this is not talking about the time where period of my life where I had a bad relationship with food. This is more just not even thinking about it, not aware of my body. It'd be like a toddler, like last second I'd realize I had to use the bathroom, and I'm racing to the bathroom. I wasn't brushing my teeth all the time, wasn't always showering. Gross. Yeah, like if you're like, ew, disgusting, yeah. If you're nodding your head like I've been there, you understand. It's not that I was trying to be gross or anything. It wasn't something that I was thinking about because it didn't matter. It wasn't part of what I was obsessed about. Now, as far as like showering, remembering like all the steps of showering, at one point in my life, I wanted to go into the military. That was like one of my goals. And me liking to research things in advance, I was learning about like boot camp and all this stuff. And somewhere along the way, I stumbled across some manual. I think it was like for the Marine Corps. Maybe it was the Army. Anyway, there was like a method to shower. It was like a sequence, like starting on the left side of your body, you go up and down. Anyway, it was this whole thing. And I thought it was so great. And it solved a problem for me of like not remembering to wash my knees or remembering to wash my heels, or because I had that problem actually. My heels, would get to wash them, like all this dirt caked up. It was gross. Anyway, and so I've followed that all my life now. I just have a mindless method now when I take a shower, and it's modified since I have a beard, but I have a system. Order of cleaning myself, it doesn't change. I don't even think about it anymore. My mind just turns off and everything gets done. And for brushing my teeth, I use an app that literally dings and tells me when to switch parts as I'm brushing my teeth. And at the end, the confetti glyph goes off and it goes ta-da, yay. And so that helps me make sure that I'm brushing my teeth the right way and taking the right amount of time. But I need guidance. And if I ever find an app that audibly gives me guidance as I take a shower, I'll probably use that too. And if that sounds ridiculous to you, and you're like, why does this guy even need this? He shouldn't need that. You're right, I shouldn't, and that's what makes it a diagnosis. When someone says they have ADHD or OCD or they're autistic or whatever it is they're telling you, and then they tell you a struggle they're having, if that sounds ridiculous to you, you're right. They shouldn't have this problem, but they do, and that's what makes it a diagnosis. Oh, sorry, that's just... It's just a sore spot for me. Like, I'll hear people talking about somebody that has whatever it is, and they'll be like, I can't believe they have that problem. I'm like, they can't either. They don't want the problem either. Anyway, all right, sorry. Where was I? All right, so next question. A specific question I have is, do you stick to a schedule? And if so, how do you stay with it? Especially with sleep disruptions and constant fatigue, I can't seem to find any rhythm. What things in your day are the most supportive? Whether I should stick to a schedule. The way I stick to routines. All right, so part of it is crisis. In 2016, 2017, my health complete collapse. I tried to ignore my health issues for years. I knew something was wrong for quite a while, and I finally had to take it seriously. I was in and out of the hospital, and ultimately received barrage of diagnoses. We started looking at everything, And a lot of things happened. But bottom line, I learned that I was autistic. I accepted that I have ADHD. I learned that I have lupus, and other things like I have sleep apnea and Hashimoto's, and all these other things start piling up. And one of the things that I was told when I received my autism diagnosis, the psychiatrist, psychologist, whatever, doctor, whoever it was, said that this was very important and that routines are really going to help me. And that if I don't get this handled, it's going to continue to affect all of my other health issues. And I took that seriously because at that point I knew something was wrong. My life was changing against my will because of my health. I was being given an involuntary invitation to change. And so that is part of it, I'll have to admit, is I don't have a choice. I have to get this sorted. I have, especially at the time, I had children in elementary school, young children, and I needed to take care of them. If I was single, I don't know what it would have been like. It's a little bit different when no one's relying on you. You still need to take care of yourself, but every action I take affects the people living in my house. And so I kind of had to, because one of my fixed rules in my head is that I must do my best by my wife and my children. That is like rule number 2. And it is an unbreakable rule. Meaning, like, if I can't do my best by them because of my health, I haven't broken the rule. Does that make sense? Like, if I can't go to my son's football game because I physically can't do it because of my health, I'm not breaking the rule. But anyway, that's a side conversation. Sorry, I got off topic. Anyway, so one of the things I did that really helped was occupational therapy. And that was where I met with somebody once a week and talked about my struggles with routine and getting things done. And we looked at my routines and how I had them structured and what I was fixating on and what I needed to focus on. And he would give me one skill to work on. And he tried to give me more than one, but I was like, I can't work on more than one thing. And then I would work on that week, go back, give him feedback. So this didn't work. Let's try something else. Or this did work. Also, I love researching. It is just one of my own special interests. So I am happy to go get a bunch of books out from the library and read about routines and productivity and time management. And that's what I did. And I listened to audiobooks and I read books and I watched a ton of YouTube videos. And then and after a while, things started sticking to my head and I started getting a sense of what the tools were. And then kind of like Legos, where you take a Lego set apart and you start building your own thing, I started building my own routines. And I started with building routines around things I was already doing. And that made it easy, because when you make a checklist and you're already going to do the 3 things in your checklist, then you check them off and you're like, oh, I can do this. So I started feeling like a success. Bedtime routine, brush your teeth, and lay your clothes out for tomorrow. I usually did that anyway. So, hey, I did those 2 things. Yeah, success. And then I could start adding to that, because now the routine was the habit. And for me, being autistic, once I got into that routine, it stuck. And even the ADHD part of my brain started learning, okay, if I get the boring things out of the way, I can do what I want to do. And so it became that motivation, if you will. I use an app called Tiimo, Tiimo. I really like it. It's developed for people with autism and ADHD, and that helped me personally. Checklists don't work for everybody. On your phone doesn't work for everybody. It just happens to work for me. And I just want to be clear with this. With all of these Q&As, anything I say, I'm just telling you what works for me. It doesn't mean it's going to work for you, because I don't know your life. I don't know what you're going through. I have my own specific challenges and things that work for me and things that don't. I have my own pressures and anxieties and everything else that makes me who I am. And so without being able to really talk to you and understand who you are and your motivations and fears and hangups and triggers and everything, some of these things will work for you, some of them won't. So please just know that. Sometimes I'll say things that people get in the comments, like, well, that won't work for me because of da-da-da. I'm like, then don't do it. It's that simple. I don't have the handle on everything. I don't have the answer to everything. Anyway, but for me, it was the biggest motivation, like I said, I think I already said this, was 1, being the best for my wife and my children. But then the second thing, well, actually kind of the rule 1 is, my own health, survival. My survival depends on my ability to follow routines. And that's kind of that's the biggest motivation I have right now. I don't know if that helps or not, but just facts. Anyway, but yeah, but sleep disruption, constant fatigue, unable to find rhythm, that is super valid. And that's why I say start small. That would be the advice I'd give. It might work, it might not work. Advice is tricky, but my suggestion would be start small. Make simple routines with no more than 2 things on it. Get to the point where you're doing that consistently, and then add one thing, and then add one thing. Get that down. It takes time. Like I said, I'm 43 years old. I was diagnosed at 39. So I've had 4 years so far to get my head around my diagnoses. And that is as a person who loves researching and reading tons of things. That's not everybody's cup of tea. And like I said, I did do occupational therapy for about 9 months, and that really did help. I have children depending on me. That is a different kind of motivating, whatever. And my spouse, I am also lucky. My spouse completely supports me. She was the one who identified that I was autistic. She has always been a champion for me being my true, authentic self from the day I met her. And that's really why I fell in love with her. And that is also an advantage. I'll be honest with you. There are days where I am on my evening routine and I forget what I'm doing, and she'll walk by and be like, "Babe, where are you on your routine? What do you need to be doing?" And that I'll be like, "Oh, wait," and I'll check it and I'll be like, "Oh yeah," and I'll go do that. Or, I've been sometimes just sitting in my chair reading, losing track of time. She's like, "Babe, it's time to go to bed." I have somebody there to remind me and support me with my routines as well. And not everybody has that support at home. Not everybody has somebody, and sometimes even people are married, their spouse isn't supportive, and I understand that. And so that's why I say, just because I say that's what I'm doing, I understand that it won't work for everybody. Anyway, alright, so we're going to stop there, and I hope this was helpful. I hope that if nothing else, even just acknowledging that these are problems for me. I'm still working on all of this, to be honest with you. This is just what's working so far, or what I'm working on so far. So hopefully this helps. Please share in the comments why it might work for you, why it doesn't. Share your story, because somebody else might read your comment and feel less alone, and at least know they're not the only person fighting that battle. Alright friends, I love you all. Thank you so much for being here. And for now, it is time for your next adventure. I'll miss you. Cheers.